Hello, Sat Sri Akal, Adab Namaste. This is Jagtar Singh, broker with Remax. Today we are with a new report on Canadian real market. This report is driven by number and facts. Stay tuned.
So, what is really going on with the Canadian housing market? Is it about to bounce back, or is the whole economy actually slowing down? If you're trying to make sense of all the conflicting signals in early 2026, believe me, you are not alone. Let's break it all down.
For most of us, buying a house is the single biggest financial decision we'll ever make. But right now, in Canada, it feels less like a decision and more like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube during an earthquake.
And you know what? There's a really, really good reason you're feeling that way.
It's because the signals coming at you are all over the place. I mean, one minute you see an optimistic headline saying the market's ready for a big recovery. The next, you hear the Bank of Canada talking about modest economic growth. So which one is it?
To figure that out, we have to start with the first huge piece of this puzzle, a massive new government plan and the conflicting reports about what it's actually going to do.
So this all kicked off back in late 2025. The government launched a brand new federal agency. And their goal, and I'm quoting directly from their announcement, was to supercharge home building across the country. Sounds pretty good, right? And to show they meant business, they put some serious cash behind it. $13 billion. This was a huge signal to the market that, hey, we are spending big to finally fix this housing crisis. But you know how it is. A big, splashy press release is one thing. What happens when we look past the headlines and into the cold, hard, independent analysis? Well, here's the twist, and it comes from the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer. While that $13 billion in new funding sounds great, you have to look at the whole picture. See, total federal spending on housing is actually projected to drop a lot. We're talking a 56% decline over the next few years as older programs wrap up. That is a massive difference. So on one side, you have the promise to supercharge everything. But on the other, you have the data-driven reality, a modest contribution. What does that mean in real terms? Just a 2.1% increase in new homes over 5 years. That's the enormous gap between the political soundbite and the actual fiscal reality. Okay, so that's the government plan. But that's only one part of the story. Now let's zoom out and check the broader economic climate. Welcome to the Economic Weather Report, where we find out why everything just feels kind of slow. To really get the mood of the economy, you have to know about the policy interest rate. Think of it like the Bank of Canada's master control dial for the economy. It directly affects the mortgage rate you're going to get. And right now, that dial is being held steady at 2.25%. So what's the Bank of Canada's forecast? In a word, cautious. They're predicting very modest growth, just 1.1% for the whole year. Inflation looks stable, which is good, but the big phrase here is heightened uncertainty, mostly thanks to risks from outside Canada. The bottom line, the economy is stable, sure, but it is definitely not booming. All right, let's put this all together. We've got a government plan that might not be the superhero it's dressed up to be, and we have a slow and steady economy. This brings us right to the heart of the matter, the buyer's dilemma, that intense push and pull you're probably feeling right now. So let's break down these forces that are pulling you in opposite directions. We'll call them the feeders and the bleeders. On the optimistic side, the feeders, buyer confidence is getting a bit better, mortgage rates are stable, and there is a ton of pent-up demand just waiting. But then you've got the bleeders pulling the other way. Population growth is actually slowing down, people's finances are stretched really thin, and crazy high rents are making it almost impossible to save for a down payment. And all this push and pull has resulted in one single really powerful number. According to recent data, there are currently 7 months of housing inventory in Ontario. Now, why does that matter so much? Well, anything over 5 months is typically called a buyer's market. And what that means for you, the buyer, is you have more choice and more negotiating power than you've had in a very long time. Look, I get it. The short-term picture is complicated, to say the least. So let's do something different. Let's zoom way out. Let's step back from the day-to-day headlines and start thinking in decades. Let's look at the big picture. To really understand today, it helps to look back at yesterday. This data shows the last major housing correction in Toronto. Check this out. A massive 36% price jump in '87, and then just a few years later, an 8% drop, followed by a slow slide. What's the takeaway here? These wild swings, as stressful as they are actually a normal part of the market's long story. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important thought.
The market is always going to be volatile. It will always be full of confusing headlines and uncertainty. Trying to perfectly time the market, it's a fool's errand. So maybe the real question isn't when is the perfect time to buy. Maybe the real question is, what's the right timeline for you?